Welcome to the Candidate Forum hosted by the League of Women Voters of Aurora, Elgin, and Central Kane County. My name is Patty Lackman, and I am from the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County. Thank you to Mayor Schelke, who is not here tonight, and the City of Batavia for affording the League the opportunity to once again use this wonderful council chambers for our forum. I would also like to thank our friends at BATV, Batavia Access Television, my friend Andrew Van Meter over there, for once again airing our forum. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator, Barb Lymans, who will provide information about tonight's forum. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you, Patty. Welcome to all of you who have joined us for the Circuit Court 16th Judicial Circuit 4th Sub-Circuit Candidate Forum. And welcome to the candidates, Republican candidate David Clement and Democrat candidate Sandra Pargo. The League's purpose is to promote civic responsibility through the informed and active participation of citizens in government and civil civic discourse. Throughout its history, the League of Women Voters has been providing opportunities for candidates seeking public office to speak directly to the voters through forums. A forum is not a debate. A forum is not the place for personal attacks or negative campaigning. The League of Women Voters strongly encourages candidates participating in a forum to use their allotted time when answering questions to inform voters of their goals, ideas, and positions. Voters will base their decisions when casting their ballot on what a candidate will specifically do if elected to office, not what their opponent won't or didn't do. So all candidates this evening have agreed to abide by the ground rules established by the forum. These rules specify the format, time limits, broadcasting of the forum, and other rules of conduct. Candidates are expected to accurately represent the facts, and their responses reflect their own views and opinions. The League of Women Voters is not responsible for the accuracy of statements made by candidates. It is the responsibility of you, the public, news media, opposing candidates, to fact-check statements made by candidates if necessary. The candidates will begin in alphabetical order with their 1-minute opening statements. Then they will alternate in order in which they answer questions for 1 minute. After the question portion of the forum, each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement, continuing with our alternating pattern. A member of the League will be acting as timer, and I will enforce the time limits. Candidates, you will be alerted that you have 15 seconds and then stop. Should a candidate exceed the 1-minute time limit, I will ask them to finish their sentence and move on to the next candidate. To ensure that the questions for tonight's forum represents a balance of topics, a panel of experienced members of the League of Women Voters have reviewed the questions submitted for appropriateness and to avoid duplication. We are very grateful to those in the community who have taken time to learn more about the candidates before casting their votes by attending or watching the candidate forums. For those in attendance, we request that you do not take any photos or video during the forum. Please listen attentively, turn off your phones and electronic devices, avoid commenting or disrupting others during the forum, and refrain from applause until the end of the forum. Finally, I want to say how appreciative we are of the candidates who are not only willing to serve in office, but agreed to be here this evening to share their ideas and goals. So let us get started. Candidate Clement, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. I think through the course of the forum tonight, you'll learn more about my professional background, so I'll tell you a little bit about who I am personally. I am David Clement. I've lived in Kane County for 40 years. I'm married to Claudia Clement, who's seated in the audience. She is also a lawyer for 40 years. We have 4 children. They are all grown and out of the house and employed. We have 3 dogs who are all still in the house and unemployed. I went to law school at Northern Illinois University, graduated in 1981, began my career, graduated in 1984, graduated college in 81, began my career at the State Attorney's Office for about a month, then went into private practice where I practiced for 9 years with my wife, and then I moved to the Public Defender's Office, and I've been a judge since December of 2010.
Thank you very much. Candidate Praga, your 1 minute opening.
All right, thank you to the League of Women Voters of Batavia for the opportunity to introduce myself to the voters. My name is Sandra Parga. I'm one of your judges here in Kane County, and I am running for Circuit Court Judge in the 4th Sub-Circuit. So the 4th Sub-Circuit roughly runs from Randall Road to the county line with DuPage and from Route 20 down to the tollway in Aurora. Associate judges are appointed by the circuit court judges. I was appointed in 2017 after practicing law for 23 years, doing civil law, criminal law, family law, serving as a guardian ad litem for children and seniors, and also as a mediator in divorce cases. For the last 4 years, I've been your juvenile court judge, working with families and children in our juvenile justice system. I am running to be the circuit court judge because I have a proven record of service both in and out of the courtroom, and I want to continue to work to ensure that our legal system works best for you, our voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Parga, we're going to start the first question with you. Can you describe your judicial philosophy and how does it influence your decision-making process?
So I believe that as judges, it's really important that we are always acting impartially, objectively, not imposing any of our personal opinions into the decisions that we make, but rather following the law. After we determine the facts, whether we agree with that law or disagree with it, our job is to follow it wherever it takes us, and that is the judicial philosophy that I follow in my courtroom.
Thank you. Candidate Clement, same question.
For the most part, I have to agree with Judge Parga on this. The law is the law, and we have to follow the law whether we like it or not. I've sat in a criminal courtroom since 2015. My philosophy there has been one of first trying to rehabilitate people while being balanced with respect to the rights of the victims who appear in my courtroom. We have many victims of violent crime in my courtroom, and there's the Victim Rights Act now. We have to be very sensitive to that. So my philosophy, it's not really a philosophy, it's defined by the law. You have to blend the compassion and how you apply the law to the facts before you, and that's how you decide the case. But my philosophy is one of being fair and impartial, and my personal opinions don't matter in a courtroom.
Candidate Clement, how do you balance this strict interpretation of the law versus evolving societal norms when deciding cases then?
I believe the best way to answer that question is the evolving societal norms are reflected in the number of specialty courts we now have available to us. There's a drug court, there's a DUI court, there's a first offender program, deferred prosecution program, there's a gun diversion program, there's mental health court, there's veterans court. When I was public defender back from from 1994 to 2010, we didn't have any programs like that. Those programs have all developed because of the change in societal norms. So when people qualify for those types of programs where they can get help rather than just being warehoused in a Department of Corrections or even a county jail and rehabilitate themselves, become functioning members of society, that's what we do. So that I believe the societal norms are without question reflected in those programs that are now available to us that were not available before.
Thank you. Candidate Parga, the same question.
So I too would agree with Judge Clement, but I would also add that I think those societal norms shape the type of legislation that gets enacted and the programs and laws that change and that we as judges must follow. And a good example of that in juvenile court is the societal norm and understanding that children are not small adults or young adults, that they are children with underdeveloped brains. And so we take that into account in my courtroom in terms of trying to figure out how to balance the safety of the child, the family, society with providing services for children. And that also is reflected in the types of services that are offered throughout our court system.
Thank you. Candidate Parga, the next question will begin with you. How do you ensure your independence as a judge in an environment that may have political or public pressure?
I think if the question is whether in our personal lives I think that there is a clear division between the work that we do as judges and any outside political pressures. Those, for me, are very two separate things. I think as a judge, it's very important to remain independent and objective, and whatever my personal beliefs may be on any particular topic does not spill over into my job as a judge. And so there's a very clear and divisive line for me between both of those things, and I think that that is covered under the ethics and the oath that we take as judges, that those will be two separate things.
Thank you. Candidate Clement?
Repeat the question for me.
Sure. How do you ensure your independence as a judge in an environment that may have political or public pressure?
When you look at what I've done throughout the campaign, you will not see endorsements from anybody. I did not solicit any endorsements. I feel that those create at least the appearance of impropriety. I try to campaign on my own. I don't solicit help from attorneys who may appear in front of me. Lawyer or judges cannot solicit funds, but we're very careful about the funds we do receive from people who do appear in front of us in court. So we try to stay away from those things because we are required by the canons to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And I'm always concerned about outside activities creating conflicts of interest. So I'm very careful about any of those outside activities that I engage in.
Thank you. Candidate Clement, how do you address concerns about socioeconomic disparities affecting the fairness of judicial outcomes?
I like to think that in my courtroom, socioeconomic disparities do not affect the outcomes of cases. People who are disadvantaged financially have the services of the Public Defender's Office. Judge Parga worked at the Public Defender's Office. I was there. They are some of the finest trial lawyers in the county. So I don't believe that people are at a disadvantage simply because they are represented by the Public Defender's Office. Certainly in front of me, it doesn't matter to me how much money you have or don't have, what your background is, or so forth. I have the law, I have the facts, and I have the framework with which I'm required to work in, and that's how cases are determined, not by socioeconomic background. I know there are some problems with that, but we do our best to make sure that those don't impinge on the decision-making process, the sentencing process, or anything else.
Thank you. Candidate Parga, the same question.
So I think that it's really important to be mindful of the fact that there are socioeconomic disparities in our courtrooms and in our system. And one of the things that I have worked on with new judges as faculty is our exercises that remind us as judges and new judges as they get onto the bench that we do have to be mindful of those experiences. And the fact that there are many biases that we all carry with us all of the time. And that helps us ensure that when we do make decisions, we are making decisions based on the facts of the case and not on any implicit biases that we all have in our everyday lives. But I think doing those exercises, teaching new judges as they come in to walk in the shoes of some of the litigants who are in our courtrooms who are socioeconomically marginalized is an important part of our job as a judge so that we are always mindful of those circumstances.
Thank you. Candidate Parga, do you think that there are steps that need to be taken for the judiciary to improve public trust and confidence in the legal system?
I do think that we have an issue with an erosion of trust in our judicial system, and I think it's very incumbent upon all of us as judges in the judicial system to work very hard to adhere to the canons, to be very mindful of activities that would create an appearance of impropriety, to not engage in those activities that we are prohibited from engaging in as judges. So being mindful of the canons, aware of them, and realizing that those canons apply to us whether we are in the courtroom or outside of the courtroom, that we are a judge really at all times, and being mindful of our activities is one of the significant ways in which we can help improve trust in our judicial system.
Candidate Clement?
I agree with what Judge Parga just said, and you have to govern yourself as if you're a judge, because you are a judge 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The other way to do that is through community.
Candidate Parga, court backlog is a growing issue. What are your thoughts on how to manage and streamline some of the process?
So I think that holding attorneys accountable is one way to streamline that process, but there's also the issue of waiting for those reports or labs which are outside of the control of the attorneys. So as the judge, you are trying to keep the case moving forward. But when there are important pieces of discovery that are needed, that's sometimes outside of the control of the lawyers or even the judge at that point. Having been in private practice for the large bulk of time before I became a judge, I also understand that it is important to be mindful of the fact that attorneys need an opportunity to negotiate. They need an opportunity to gather mitigation for their lawyers, or on the state side, that they need an opportunity to speak with their victims. So it is a matter of trying to balance moving the case along with being fair and just at the same time.
Candidate Clement, same question.
We had an issue it had to do with the jail, and I'll address it in terms of the jail. A backlog of cases that were 1, 2, or 3 years old or older in our county jail, and this was prior to the implementation of the Safety Act. And the first thing I said to the chief judge when he pointed out that he had all these statistics, I said that this is the judge's fault. It's the judge's fault that we let these cases get this old. So we implemented procedures, each in our own courtrooms, to move these cases, and the way to move these cases is to set them for trial because they have that end date then, and we have all but eliminated that backlog. I do not think there is anybody who is fit to stand trial. I think there's one person unfit to stand trial who's been in more than 3 years, yes. But we've eliminated the backlog of 2-year-old cases and 3-year-old cases. A felony case, it's more than a year old. If it's a first-degree murder case, that's not an old case. And we recognize that. But the judges are the ones that have to eliminate that backlog with the considerations that Judge Parga spoke about.
Candidate Clement, do you believe there are areas of law that require reform, particularly in sentencing practices? If so, which areas and why?
With respect to sentences, there are laws that have mandatory minimums that sometimes, and add-ons, mandatory add-ons. For instance, if someone is sentenced to 25 years in a case, and there's a mandatory add-on of another 20 years, then the minimum in the case is 45 years. So there needs to be, I think, more discretion in the courts with those mandatory sentences. And the reason I say that is that, as I said earlier, I think no two cases are alike and no two defendants are alike. And to treat everybody with the cookie cutter mandatory sentencing is sometimes unfair. They have changed that with respect to people who are under the age of 18 and charged as adults. But for many, that creates a real inequity in the sentencing process.
Candidate Parga?
I would agree. I think that where we have laws that take discretion away from the judge to consider the individual facts of the person who's standing before the judge for sentencing, for example, is a place that would benefit from reform. Because no two cases are alike, because no two situations are alike, it's very important to give the judge an opportunity to take into account all of the different personal factors involved in that case, and mandatory minimum sentences take that away from the judge and does treat everyone the same based simply on the charge.
Candidate Parga, what do you believe are the biggest barriers to accessing justice in today's legal system? How can the judiciary play a role in addressing these?
So some of the biggest issues to access to justice is language access in our courtrooms, and that's a project that I've worked on since I've been on the bench and very passionate about, making sure that in our courtrooms here in Kane County, we are using, whether it's language or sign language interpreters that are registered and certified. because there was a time in our county when we did not use registered or certified interpreters, and that really resulted in people not knowing what was happening with their cases. It resulted in them not getting correct information. And so when I did take the bench, that was one of the projects I really wanted to work on, and we were able to change that policy in Kane County so that now we only use interpreters that are certified and registered, and subsequently are reimbursed 100% for the use of those interpreters.
Candidate Clement.
The project that Judge Parga was part of that changed the interpreter system is one of the best changes I've seen in the 30 years I've worked in Kane County, either as the public defender or as a judge. That was, I think, the biggest barrier, but it remains a barrier. There are an insufficient number of interpreters, which is no one's fault, I think, except budgets and market. There's also, I think, a number of attorneys who speak the language and get the clients, but aren't really qualified to be doing the work. And I've had examples of that in my courtroom, which has created problems down the road for the defendant and the court system. We have to do things twice. So I think there's a lack of legal resources available to people who have language barriers, and I think that creates an inequity in the system for them.
Thank you. And this will be our last question. Candidate Clement, how do you ensure ethical conduct, how do you ensure ethical conduct within the courtroom and among those who work under your supervision?
I believe that the expectations in my courtroom are clear. You lead by example, you act ethically, the people in front of you act ethically. If you treat people with respect, even the most unruly defendants who sometimes come in front of me act respectfully. There are, of course, exceptions. The lawyers, pretty much across the board, are very ethical, do their jobs very well. My staff, who none of them work for me, they're deputy clerks, court reporters, they all act very ethically. And the problem defendants we have once in a while, ultimately you have the power of contempt of court, which I use very, very rarely.
Candidate Parga.
I think it is the job of the judge to make sure that we set a good example and that we lead by example in our courtrooms, so that if we treat people with respect and kindness, our clerks, our bailiffs will do the same. And that if we become aware that someone is not being treated with respect and kindness, that we bring it to their attention as the leader in that courtroom. So I think that maintaining ethics in the courtroom begins and ends with us in how we comport ourselves, the conversations that we have with the lawyers, making sure that we aren't having conversations about any cases when the case isn't before the bench. And part of that is excusing ourselves when we are done with our court call so that we don't inadvertently become part of just regular conversations that happen in the courtroom.
It is now time for closing statements. So Candidate Parga, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I just want to humbly ask you for your support and your vote in November. I very much believe in serving the community, and that's why I am running for this job. I have worked on many projects in the court system to make access to justice more of a reality for the litigants who come into our courtroom. From the interpretation project that I worked on, to training new judges to speak plainly to those litigants who come into the courtroom, to serving as faculty for different classes. I don't believe in just coming into the courtroom, doing my job, and going home. I believe in always looking to see how I can make that courtroom better for others. Outside of the courtroom, I live my life the same way. Service is at the root of everything that I do, from volunteering at Lazarus House to other organizations, again, to make our community a better place to live. And that's what I would do, is serve our litigants here to make our justice system best for them.
Candidate Clement, you have 1 minute.
I would also like to thank the League for doing this and for everyone who came here. I have, since 1994, worked in public service as a public defender for 16 years and as a judge now for going on 14 years. So my career essentially has been one of public service. As a circuit judge, you are a leader in our court system, and as public defender and even as an associate judge now, I have been a leader among my peers, and certainly I was a leader of the public defender's office for all of those years. I have those proven leadership skills that are necessary as a circuit judge. I've served on committees regarding the reopening of the courthouse during COVID, interviewing and hiring the new public defender. So those are the qualities I bring to 40 years of experience, 30 of it as a public servant, and those leadership skills that are both proven and established within the judiciary. So I'm asking for your support as well.
Thank you. On behalf of the community, thank you both for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Our democracy thrives when all of us are engaged. Attending or watching a candidate forum is an excellent way to be empowered to join discussions on local issues and make your voices heard on Election Day. Additional information on how and when to vote can be found at illinoisvoterguide.org and the Central Kane County League of Women Voters website and social media. Recording of this forum can be found on the League of Women Voters of Central Kane County website and Batavia Access Television.
A break.
And we're now going to take a break for a few minutes until the other candidates arrive. Thank you. The goal of the League of Women Voters is to hold forums in contested races so voters can make an informed choice. All candidates for the Illinois House of Representative District 49 were invited to participate in a forum tonight. We believe it's important to offer every candidate the opportunity to share their vision with the community. We are disappointed that Republican candidate Hannah Billingsley has declined the invitation to participate. Therefore, per the policy of the League of Women Voters, we are providing Democrat candidate Maura Hirschauer 3 minutes to speak so you can hear directly from her, her goals, and her platform.
Thank you. My name is Maura Hirschauer, and I am your current state representative of the 49th District. It's an honor to serve you all, and it is a privilege to ask for your vote in re-election. As a voter myself, and someone who has worked in my community for positive change long before running for office, I think it is sad to see that my opponent has decided against meeting her voters and against explaining her agenda. Voters need to be able to ask questions and get direct answers about where their officials stand. That is why I accepted this invitation to be here, and I am disappointed that my opponent did not. And now let me tell you a little bit about myself. Before serving the public and state government, I served my community as a board member of a local nonprofit organization. I was a teacher for many years, which informs the work I do on education policy, especially in the space of early childhood. As a working mom, I know how to run an efficient household budget, and I hold our state budget to those same strict standards. Accountability and transparency are important. Throughout my tenure as a state representative, I have stayed connected to our community through continuous door knocking, town halls, and monthly community advisory committee meetings that convene on all sorts of issues: senior issues, education, mental health, the environment, and veteran services. These folks keep us humble, they drive policy for us, and they really help us be good leaders in Springfield. I am rooted in this community, and I spend each day talking and listening to voters at their front doors. I know that the economy is weighing heavily on folks. That is why I worked to extend the child tax credit, eliminate the grocery tax, and why I will continue to fight for working families. Every day, I speak with seniors who are struggling to make ends meet on their fixed budget. That's why I will fight for property tax reform and to improve the qualifications for our senior property tax exemption. As a mother, I have not yet finished the job that I came to Springfield to do, to make our schools and communities safer for our children. There is so much more work to be done to address the gun violence epidemic. When I am reelected, I will deliver on a comprehensive safe firearms storage law and critical changes to keep survivors of domestic violence and their families safe. We must pass Karina's bill and ensure that law enforcement has the support they need to take guns away from abusers while serving orders of protection. I am running for re-election so that my children and yours can thrive. I run for their ability to make their own personal health care decisions, to ensure a clean and healthy planet for their future, and to keep their communities and schools free from gun violence. I am proud of the work we have done together, and I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you. Once again, the goal of the League of Women Voters is to hold forums in contested races so voters can make informed decisions. All candidates for the Illinois Senate District 25 were invited to participate in a forum tonight. We believe it is important to offer every candidate the opportunity to share their vision for the community. We are disappointed that Republican candidate Heather Brown has declined the invitation to participate. Therefore, per the policy of the League of Women Voters, we are providing Democrat candidate Karina Villa 3 minutes to speak so you can hear directly from her goals, and her platform.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to start off by saying thank you to the League of Women Voters and for all of you who are here today to hear this discussion. For those of you who don't know me, I am Karina Villa, and I'm the Illinois State Senator of the 25th Senate District. More importantly, before that, I was a school social worker for 15 years. Part of the reason why I decided to run was because I saw day in and day out the issues that were impacting the families that I was working with. These issues spanned from access to healthcare, mental health services, wanting Springfield to be there in an ethical way representing people. These were issues that I saw every day as a school social worker and decided to run for office because I believed that that my community was not receiving the representation that they deserved. So when I got to Springfield, I got straight to work, immediately working on passing legislation with ethics reform. I fought to rein in corruption by passing legislation that stops legislators from becoming lobbyists when they leave office, putting an end to shadow lobbying, and gave greater power to the Inspector General to investigate corruption because our state deserves better. In regards to healthcare, I believe that access to quality healthcare is a right that everyone deserves. We've passed legislation that improves the quality of health insurance, increases access to mental health care, and cracks down on price gouging for certain prescription drugs. Illinois is also a place that will always trust women to make their own healthcare decisions. And because of that, we passed legislation that protects the right to choose. As a former social worker, I know how hard educators work to ensure that every child is given a world-class education. As a state senator, I have supported legislation that brings funding to our district schools. I've made sure that we improve support for early childhood education, and I've secured millions of dollars for apprenticeship programs to ensure that more young people can receive the support needed to learn from a trade that will set them up for success. Housing is one of the most important issues to the people who live in the 25th Senate District. We know that housing insecurity is a major concern for all Illinoisans. We've gotten to work by strengthening tenant protections to ensure that everyone has a quality place to rest their heads and created better incentives for developers to build more affordable housing. In regards to fiscal responsibility, we made sure to pass balanced budgets every year since I was elected to office. Thank you so much. I see a stop sign, so I will respect that time. Thank you.
Thank you both for taking the time to being with us here tonight. Please join me. We had planned on hearing from candidate Jerry Evans, who's running for the Congressional District 11 this evening, to make a 3-minute statement. But unfortunately, we're unable to contact him to see if he's still planning to attend. So we'll move on with our agenda, and should he come at a later time, we'll hear from him then. So now I'd like to introduce Benjamin Herther. Oh, Haberther. I'm so sorry, Ben. Is he here? Okay. Ben is the Executive Director of the Kane County Forest Preserve District and is here to talk about a referendum question that will be on the ballot November 5th. Thank you, Ben.
Yes, thank you. And I think it's probably appropriate that I think we're the last item of the evening. Just point that out because we're also the last item on your ballot. So you'll see that on November 5th. But my name is Ben Haberther. I'm the Executive Director. I've held that position for 2 years. I've been with the Forest Preserve District for 14 years, and I'm happy to tell you more about what's on the ballot here. I also want to thank the League for the opportunity to speak about this, Mayor Schelke for hosting the event, and Senator Villa and Representative Hirschauer have also supported a lot of Forest Preserve District efforts. So the Forest Preserve District was actually started by the Kane County Federation of Women's Club, which I thought was pertinent for this evening. That was almost exactly 100 years ago. We'll be celebrating our centennial on June 8th at Johnson's Mound, which is the very first forest preserve, so we'll be taking that there. You can see our mission up here. I won't read it to you, but know that our 3 pillars are conservation, environmental education, and recreation. And just like the League of Women Voters, we are apolitical. We believe nature is for everybody, and so it's a place where everybody can enjoy nature. As part of that mission, a lot of what we do helps to clean the air, improve water quality, especially right here in the Fox River Valley, and ups quality of life for everybody in the county. We do all that for just 1.5% of your property taxes. I like to point this out because often you'll see the Forest Preserve District in with park districts, which takes it over 5%, but we're actually less than 2 cents on the dollar. And that stays this way with this referendum. So why a referendum now? I'll show you a little bit of history. Well, I'll show you about 100 years of history in the Forest Preserve, but quite quickly. So we started in 1925, but all the way up through 1938, we only had 4 forest preserves. That was due to the Great Depression. And for the first 75 years of the existence of the Forest Preserve, the only way the Forest Preserve District grew was through non-referendum bonding. So what that looked like from 1938 to 1999 was less than 7,000 acres, which is a small percentage of the county in 75 years. In 1999, Forest Preserve District President Hoscheit with Executive Director Dewar started our first bond referendums, which started to show much quicker growth across the Forest Preserve District. So after our first 2 referendum, 99 and 2005, we had grown over 12,000 acres. In 2007, there was another referendum that brought on an additional 6,000 acres. 2011 referendum took the Forest Preserve District up to over 20,000 acres. And as of today, we're finishing up the 2017 bond referendum and just shy of 24,000 acres across the whole county. So what that has meant is a much larger increase in the holdings of the Forest Preserve District without an equivalent rise in staff or the operation ability for the maintenance of those. So that kind of lends some urgency to the question at hand now. This is what the ballot question is going to look like. Again, I'm definitely not going to read this to you, but I will mention I've already done my early voting, and if you're voting at the county, it's a long question, so it gets broken up. And like I mentioned, this question will be after the judges on your ballot. Just sticking to the facts here, we have a much larger version of this, but the takeaway for this land acquisition preserve improvement referendum, different than the bond referendum. You're looking at $10 per $100,000 of your home value. So we put a sample in here to help understand what the question is. So if you assume the average home price is about $290,000 in Kane County. So for ease of math, consider a $300,000 home. You're looking at $30 per year for 2024. Those bond referenda that I mentioned will be retiring throughout 2025 and 2027. So whether or not this referendum passes, the Forest Preserve section of your property taxes will be going down. This is what it looks like if the referendum were to pass. So we just have a couple case studies on here on what you can expect from the Forest Preserve District should this referendum pass. Like I mentioned, we do recreation, conservation, environmental education, so I have a couple examples of each of those. This first one is all the way up in the north part of the county, Rutland Township. At the very top of your screen there, you'll see a wetland indicated. That's Rutland Bog. It's the only intact bog in Kane County. A full 1 out of every 5 species are considered endangered and threatened. It's long been recognized as a high-quality natural area, and we were able to protect it in 2018 after the successful passage of the 2017 referendum. We'd now like to get that opened up to the public, and you can see recreational trails, picnic shelters, restrooms. That's the type of development we talk about at the Forest Preserve District. So this is a project that will be ready to go, just waiting for the grant match. This is another project to the north part of the county. This is Plato Township. Some of you may have heard of the Muirhead Springs Forest Preserve, where we've done a successful wetland mitigation bank. It's been the biggest and largest wetland restoration in our history, and indeed in the county. And we'd also like to bring people to see this. So we're looking at an ADA accessible, multi-tiered structure, which really typifies the type of passive recreation for everybody in Kane County. You'll notice on the left, I wanted to include this picture. So this is federally threatened endangered whooping cranes. It's just a point of pride. Those were right there at Muirhead Springs. There's only 700 of these left in the world. Only 500 still migrate, and 3 of them landed in Kane County 8 months after this restoration began. You also may have heard that we're getting very close to having bison in the forest preserves. May not be this fall, but in 2025, we already have the pen structure built in Burlington Forest Preserve. And so we're working with multiple partners to make sure that all memorandums of understanding are airtight and moving forward. But we would like to expand that from the original, from the first 35-acre paddock, and really turn this into a wildlife reintroduction program rather than just a closed pen type of structure. So these would be native bison on native prairie. And finally, just one of the examples that we'd like to do to expand our environmental education offerings. This would be in Aurora at Arlene Shoemaker Forest Preserve. We've done some initial planning on an urban ecology field station. So this wouldn't be manned all of the time, but it would be available to our naturalists as well as local educators for getting children kind of off the devices and into nature. And it's one that we think would be outstanding. So I think that's about as quick as I've mentioned the facts on this. You can find out more just right outside where we have some fact-based information, but you also see the website here. And joining me tonight is our Director of Community Engagement, as well as our Director of Finance for any more questions this evening. But thank you once again.
Thank you. We do have 2 questions for you.
Sure.
Would any of these projects require the hiring of additional personnel for the Forest Preserve District?
Yes, that's a good question. So specifically the bison project, we're looking at bringing in some part-time staff, regardless of whether or not the referendum passes, because we've already started the first phase on that. But we would have some expansion, but all of the projects I showed you tonight are more grant dependent than staff dependent.
The second question is, how will the referendum help people's ability to explore the preserves? and utilize them?
Great question. Yes, so specifically the accessibility projects that we put in here. So a lot of the forest preserves, we intend to have a small footprint on there, but we'd also like to get people in there as much as possible. So we want to have accessible paths everywhere we can. So it's a combination of limestone paths and mowed paths, and this is just a sort of development project. We leverage local dollars to bring in state and federal dollars. So some of the biggest grants that we use from the state are open space land and development grants, what's called an OSLAD grant, as well as land and water conservation fund. So those are both approximately $800,000 to $1 million per year. So we need to have money in our land acquisition funds to have as match so we can bring those dollars to Kane County. A full fifth of the acres in the forest preserve system were leveraged that way, and so we'd like to continue to do that.
So just to clarify, so you still will be able to get those grants because you need you need the referendum to get those grants.
So right now, there are no land acquisition dollars in the Forest Preserve District Fund. So there is no match available right now. So that's part of the need for a referendum right now.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure you'll be around to answer questions for those in the audience. So thank you. And that concludes our program for this evening. Thank you so much for attending and for watching. Good night.